In 1995, New Zealand officially confirmed what biologists had feared for decades. There were exactly 51 Kākāpōs left alive in the entire world. A giant, flightless parrot that had dominated the forests for millions of years was now clinging to existence through individual names, microchips, and personalized tracking files. With numbers that low, most scientists believed it was only a matter of time before the Kakapo disappeared completely due to inbreeding and genetic decline. But 3 decades later, when researchers sequenced the genomes of the entire surviving population, they discovered a truth that completely defied all expectations. What was happening inside the Kakapo's DNA didn't look like any extinction scenario science had ever seen. This isn't just a story about a bird saved by humans. It's proof that nature sometimes quietly finds its own way to survive, even when all hope seems completely lost. Part 1. The Silent King of the New Zealand Forests. Millions of years before humans ever set foot in New Zealand, this place was practically a world cut off from the rest of the earth. There were no tigers, no wolves, no foxes, not even a single land-dwelling predator. In that isolation lasting over 80 million years, nature cooked up an ecosystem so bizarre that scientists call New Zealand the planet's evolutionary laboratory. And right in the middle of that ancient forest, one peculiar bird quietly became one of the most important creatures around the Kākāpō. It's the only parrot in the world that has completely lost the ability to fly. And it's also the heaviest parrot ever recorded, with full-grown males tipping the scales at over 9 pounds. While most birds rely on their wings to survive, the Kākāpō evolved in the exact opposite direction. Their wings are short and weak, their bones are heavier, and their chest muscles shrank over millions of years because they had virtually no reason to take flight. Instead, they developed incredibly strong legs, climbing trees using their signature curved beaks, and then slowly floating back down by spreading their wings like a natural parachute. Researchers believe that before humans showed up, the Kakapo was one of the most widespread birds in New Zealand. During the day, they hid under dense fern thickets or inside ancient tree hollows. When night fell, the whole forest truly woke up to the slow footsteps of these giant parrots. They quietly trekked across moss-covered valleys, munching on young leaves, flowers, fruits, and seeds from dozens of native plants. Every foraging trip, spanning miles, accidentally turned them into the forest's mail carriers, carrying seeds in their digestive tracts and dispersing them to entirely new areas. That role was way more critical than the Kākāpō's sluggish look let on. A lot of native plants relied heavily on animals like the Kakapo to expand their growing range. As seeds were scattered across the forest, new saplings kept popping up, creating habitats for insects, providing food for smaller birds, and maintaining the entire structure of the forest across generations. In other words, the Kākāpō wasn't just a resident of the woods. They were one of the silent engineers keeping that ecological machine running for millions of years. But maybe the most fascinating thing about the Kākāpō is how they breed. Unlike most other birds, Kākāpōs don't pair up to nest every few years. When the native rimu trees hit a massive fruiting season, the males kick off a bizarre mating ritual known as booming. They dig shallow bowls on hilltops or mountain ridges, inflate the air sacs in their chests, and pump out incredibly low-frequency calls. Every boom rings out like a giant drum in the middle of the night forest, carrying for miles. Females from far away track that sound to pick out the healthiest mate. For thousands, maybe even millions of years, that ritual repeated almost without change. The booming of the Kākāpō used to be the heartbeat of pristine New Zealand forests, echoing every breeding season and signaling that the ecosystem was still running exactly as nature intended. Looking at that lifestyle, it's hard to believe a species so perfectly adapted to its homeland could be pushed to the brink of extinction in just a few centuries. But the one thing the Kākāpō never had to learn during millions of years of evolution would be the exact thing that nearly wiped out their entire species once humans showed up. Part 2. When the first predators landed, the Kākāpō's death sentence began. But then the wheels of history started turning in a totally different direction. The scary part is that the Kakapo wasn't decimated by a flood, a volcanic eruption, or brutal climate change. The ones who pushed them to the edge were the smartest creatures on the planet humans. Around the 13th century, the first Polynesians set foot in New Zealand, bringing along the Polynesian rat Kiori. To most of the world, that's just a regular rodent, but for an ecosystem that evolved for tens of millions of years with practically no ground predators. Introducing them was like dropping a hunter into a world with absolutely zero defenses. Bird eggs, chicks, and countless native animals started getting picked off at an unprecedented rate. And that was just the beginning. By the 19th century, the wave of European settlers delivered the fatal blow. Riding along on their ocean-crossing ships were brown rats, black rats, domestic cats, and a whole slew of other predators. Later on, to control a rapidly exploding rabbit population, humans introduced stoats, ferrets, and weasels to New Zealand, truly believing they could bend nature to their will. But nature never plays by our simple calculations, instead of just hunting rabbits. The new predators quickly found a much easier meal: flightless birds with practically no way to defend themselves. The Kakapo became the perfect target through millions of years of evolution. The Kakapo never had to learn how to outrun predators that hunt by scent. When they sense danger, their reflex isn't to bolt or try to fly away, they just freeze, press their bodies flat against the ground, and trust that their mossy green and black streaked feathers will camouflage them into the underbrush. That tactic worked wonders for their ancestors against birds of prey that only hunt by sight. But against the highly sensitive noses of cats and stoats, it was practically useless. No matter how well a Kakapo hid, its signature scent quickly led predators right to it. A full-grown adult, which takes nearly a decade to reach breeding age, could be killed in minutes. The tragedy was severely compounded by the fact that the Kakapo is one of the slowest breeding birds on Earth. Females don't breed every year. They only lay eggs when the rimu trees hit those special fruiting seasons, which usually only happens every 2 to 4 years. Each clutch only has a few eggs, and the female has to incubate and raise the chicks entirely on her own for months. That meant losing just a few adults a year was enough to ensure the population could never breed fast enough to replace the ones being killed, while the invasive predators bred nonstop. The Kakapo stood almost no chance of catching up in this race for survival. And as these gentle giants vanished one by one, a domino effect ripped through New Zealand's forests. Those nightly foraging trips that scattered seeds everywhere were gone. Many native plants lost one of their most crucial seed dispersers. Forest clearings that used to be full of new saplings slowly thinned out. The food chain quietly shifted decade by decade. The scariest part is that the collapse didn't happen overnight. Everything moved so slowly that a lot of people didn't even notice the ecosystem was bleeding out, inch by inch, until ecologists started comparing generational data and realized the forest just wasn't functioning like it used to. Entering the 20th century, reports on the Kakapo grew increasingly grim. Population after mainland population was declared extinct. Forests that used to echo with the booming of males every breeding season fell dead silent. In 1977, the discovery of a surviving Kakapo population on Stewart Island sparked one last glimmer of hope. But that hope was quickly overshadowed when scientists confirmed that feral cats had also made it to the island and were hunting the Kakapos at an alarming rate. They knew that if they left them there, extinction was only a matter of time. One of the boldest conservation campaigns in New Zealand history was immediately launched. Every single surviving Kakapo was captured, health-checked, fitted with a tracking device, and airlifted or shipped to offshore islands that had been completely cleared of predators. It was an unprecedented move. Nobody knew if isolating an entire species on small islands would actually save them or just change the venue for a slower extinction. By 1995, when the Kakapo recovery program officially kicked off, a comprehensive census revealed that there were only 51 Kākāpōs left in the entire world, 31 males and 20 females. To most biologists, that number was basically a death sentence. According to every genetic model, a population that's small is practically doomed to suffer from inbreeding, a loss of genetic diversity, dropping fertility rates, and ultimately, permanent extinction. But what no one saw coming was that, deep inside the genomes of those final 51 individuals, nature had quietly kept a secret, powerful enough to make the entire scientific community rethink what they thought was a certainty. Part 3. What geneticists were sure would happen ended up not happening at all by the mid-1990s, when the global Kakapo population hit a rock-bottom 51 individuals. The majority of the scientific world came to the exact same conclusion, even if humans could protect them from cats, rats, and stoats. There was still an almost unbeatable enemy left: their own genetics. In conservation biology, this is known as a genetic bottleneck, when a population shrinks down to just a few dozen individuals. Genetic diversity takes a massive nosedive. The survivors are forced to mate with close relatives. Generation after generation, harmful mutations pile up. The number of unhatched eggs spikes. More chicks die off. Fertility plummets. And eventually, the entire species wipes out even if their habitat is restored. This is a rule documented in so many animals worldwide, from cheetahs and red wolves to rare primate populations. So, hardly anyone believed the Kakapo could be the exception, for years after. The Kakapo recovery program didn't just casually protect the birds. Every single individual was given a name, fitted with a radio transmitter, had their blood sampled, their pedigree tracked, and their entire lives monitored. Scientists knew exactly which chick came from which parents, which individuals carried high genetic value, and who needed to breed first to avoid inbreeding. When gene sequencing tech blew up in the early 21st century, they decided to pull off an unprecedented, massive study sequencing the genomes of almost the entire living Kākāpō population. The goal was crystal clear. They wanted to know just how bad the genetic damage was and how many generations this bird actually had left. But when the first batches of data popped up on their screens, the research team started noticing something that didn't line up with the textbooks. They double-checked the algorithms. They cross-referenced every DNA sample. They ran the analysis over and over to rule out any mistakes. Yet, the results didn't budge. The most shocking part wasn't that the Kakapo was completely immune to inbreeding. They still carried the scars of a massive population crash. But the level of harmful mutations in the current population was significantly lower than anyone predicted. Specifically, the study published on the Kakapo genome revealed that the Stewart Island lineage, where most of today's surviving individuals come from, had spent a very long time surviving as a small population long before humans ever showed up. That exact history accidentally allowed natural selection to purge a ton of detrimental mutations over thousands of generations. In other words, the severely harmful genes had slowly been weeded out of the population long before we ever started studying them. This discovery instantly grabbed the attention of conservation geneticists worldwide. It didn't totally dismiss the risk of inbreeding, nor did it mean the Kakapo was 100% out of the woods. But it did prove that nature sometimes packs adaptation mechanisms way more complex than the simple models we build. A tiny population doesn't always meet the exact same tragic end. A species' unique evolutionary history can create massive differences in how well they handle a genetic crisis. However, scientists were quick to point out that this wasn't some magic trick that let the Kakapo save itself completely. Without the removal of predators, monitoring every single nest, assisting with hatching, managing breeding pairs, and protecting their habitat for decades. That genetic edge would never have been enough to save the species. The real magic here is that, for the first time in a long time, science and nature weren't clashing. Humans stopped our own mistakes from doing more damage, and nature quietly used what millions of years of evolution had built up to finish the job. And as the Kakapo numbers started ticking up breeding season after breeding season, ecologists began to realize that it wasn't just a bird making a comeback. What was changing every single day was the very New Zealand forests that had been silent for over a century. Part 4. When the return of a bird begins to heal the entire forest in nature. It's incredibly rare for the recovery of one species to only affect that species. Every creature is a link in the web of life, and when a crucial link is reconnected, the changes ripple out in ways humans often can't see right away. The Kākāpō is no different. At first, the goal of the Kākāpō recovery program was simply to stop this parrot from going extinct. But after decades of monitoring, ecologists realized that they weren't just reviving Kākāpō individuals, they were reviving biological processes that had been broken for hundreds of years. Every night, as the Kākāpōs continue to roam under the forest canopy, looking for young leaves, fruits, and seeds, they are accidentally doing the exact same job their ancestors did millions of years ago. The seeds that pass through their digestive tracts get scattered to totally different parts of the woods, helping native plants expand their reach. As they move around, they also carve out tiny trails through the thick vegetation, opening up gaps so sunlight and rainwater can easily hit the lower canopy. These changes happen incredibly slowly, making them almost impossible to spot after just a year or two. But when researchers compare field data over decades, they're starting to see a boost in saplings, the recovery of plant communities, and a reboot of regeneration cycles that had tanked after the Kakapo vanished. Meanwhile, the conservation program itself triggered a massive positive ripple effect nobody fully anticipated. To protect this bird, New Zealand completely eradicated rats, cats, and stoats from multiple offshore islands. This didn't just give the Kākāpō a safe haven, it ended up benefiting a whole slew of other native birds, rare insects, reptiles, and endemic plants. Islands that were on the brink of losing their biodiversity slowly morphed into living laboratories, where nature actually has a chance to operate much like it did before humans brought in invasive species. In other words, saving the Kākāpō accidentally saved an entire chunk of New Zealand's ecosystem. The clearest results show up in the numbers. From a rock-bottom 51 individuals in 1995, the Kākāpō population has steadily climbed across breeding seasons, all thanks to a mix of habitat protection, genetic management, and veterinary care. By 2022, the count hit 252, the highest it had been since the conservation program started, even though a few older individuals passed away after that. Keeping the total at around 236 birds by early 2026, it's still the largest population in the species' modern history. More importantly, every breeding season is no longer a desperate sprint to stave off extinction. It's become a phase of controlled population expansion, where every single newly hatched chick is added to the genetic database to maintain diversity for the long haul. Maybe the biggest shift of all is how people actually view the Kākāpō. Over 30 years ago, more than a few scientists thought dumping so many resources into a few dozen surviving birds was basically a lost cause. Some believed nature had already crossed the point of no return, but reality proved them wrong. Recent studies don't just view the Kākāpō as a species that needs saving, they see it as a crucial model helping geneticists understand exactly how tiny populations can survive for thousands of years, and how natural selection quietly purges bad mutations. From a symbol of conservation failure, the Kākāpō has transformed into one of the most inspiring stories in modern biology. But perhaps the biggest takeaway isn't hidden in the data or the scientific papers. The Kākāpō didn't bounce back because humans pulled off a miracle. They bounced back because humans finally stopped forcing nature to play by our rules. Removed the predators we introduced, gave them back their safe forests, and patiently waited for nature to do the rest. That's a massive difference between controlling nature and partnering with it. And the story of the Kākāpō is hard proof that when humans know when to step back, life always finds a way to keep going. Part 5. Nature doesn't need miracles. It just needs humans to stop destroying it. If you just look at the numbers, the Kakapo story can be summed up pretty simply from 51 birds in 1995 to over 230 by early 2026. But behind that shift is a lesson way bigger than just successfully saving a rare bird. The Kākāpō forced scientists to admit that nature isn't just a simple machine you can perfectly predict with equations or statistical models. For decades, humans believed that once a population shrank down to a few dozen individuals, its fate was basically sealed. The Kākāpō didn't completely rewrite that rule, but it proved that evolution is always way more complex than we think. A species' million-year history can leave behind silent adaptation mechanisms that humans couldn't even see until gene sequencing technology caught up. What's even more thought-provoking is that if you only look at today's results, a lot of people would assume this is a 100% victory for science. But that isn't exactly true. Science didn't build a new Kākāpō. Science didn't teach them how to breed, didn't rewrite their genomes, and didn't force the native forests to regenerate on their own. What science did do was help us recognize our own screw-ups, and then systematically remove the triggers that pushed this bird to the brink of extinction. Once the rats, cats, and stoats were booted off the islands, once the forests were protected, once every single Kākāpō was given another shot at survival. For the rest of it, nature was the one getting the job done. There's a really fascinating paradox in the history of conservation. A ton of ecological disasters kick off when humans believe we understand nature well enough to meddle with it. People brought stoats to New Zealand to wipe out rabbits. The result? A whole wave of native birds became victims. People dropped cats on islands to control rats. Those same cats ended up hunting animals that had never even seen a predator before. Just one seemingly logical decision can trigger a chain reaction that lasts for centuries. And then it takes generations of scientists, rangers, volunteers, and the Maori community to slowly fix the fallout. Nature always has a way of balancing itself out, but every time humans break that balance, the price we pay is usually way higher than anything we pictured at the start. Today, whenever a new Kākāpō chick hatches, it isn't just a win for New Zealand conservationists, it's become a symbol for a totally new approach to nature conservation worldwide instead of trying to micromanage everything. Humans need to learn to understand, respect, and support the rules that have been in place long before we ever showed up. The Kākāpō story proves that hope is always there, even when every piece of data points straight to extinction. But that hope only shows up when humans are humble enough to admit that we aren't the center of the ecosystem. And maybe that's what really makes the Kākāpō one of the most mind-blowing conservation stories of the 21st century. Not because they beat extinction, but because they changed how we view our own role in nature. We aren't the ones writing all of Earth's rules. We're just a tiny piece of a system that was running for millions of years before the very first civilization even existed.